Okay, so what I thought of doing is that we go through the markets a little bit. What are we doing there? What's the status? And I want questions and discussions from the floor. If we leave all of you guys, please, you need to know exactly what we're going to do, so I'll try and lead it. The panel is available. We'll try and give you an update on the dispute, everything of that. Let me just start with a general point. If we look at the past year, we had 29 interceptions on CBS. There's two things I want to say. So FCM, in my opinion, we had effectively two, because the one was need to be withdrawn because it was opened before the 25 days of fulfilling its requirement on the other side. So 2 out of a volume of about 800,000 tons is minuscule, and although 30 might also be minuscule in percentages, it's really, really small. If we compare it to anyone else, that's why we have the dispute, because there's interceptions in the order of between 40 and 129 from other countries exporting to the EU, different products, yes. So if you want to be fair and not discriminate, you will deal with a pest unilaterally, which they're not doing. Just one point. We didn't have a good year on CBS. I'm not trying to punish or nail anybody. Let me just give you a figure. So we had 2,200 withdrawals of orchards. After I joined you guys in 2014, we said, look, we don't know where the CBS is, you guys do. Limpopo, you had 2,200 withdrawals in 2015. Last year you had 800. Guys, you know where the CB is. I don't. No one else does. In the same time, the Eastern Cape, not because we're here, went from 300 withdrawals to 600. And then the Limpopo guys might say, yes, because the CBS is here. Not true, though. So in terms of the total, if we look at the proportionate issue with CBS, we have it in October. So September and October, so when we stop the market, that is really the dangerous part. You guys need to help us on the withdrawal and managing the CBS. CBS at the moment is too high for comfort. We could have had another measure introduced this year on merit, and we wouldn't have been able to complain. On FCM, it's totally different. There we're on the other side, and we're arguing that case in any case. So what challenges lie ahead? Obviously, the first challenge in front of us at the moment is the fact that oranges are now subject to that 20 days at 2 degrees pulp, which is quite a challenge. That's the reality of it where we are. We know there's still some bilateral discussions going on with high focus and an instruction to resolve, so we might have respite. But that's a small one, and for the moment we have to focus on the fact that that's what we need to get to. So we don't really know with what capacity, what was built, and what capacity is there to get the fruit, the oranges going to the EU to 2 degrees pulp for the 20 days that it needs to be under cooling going there. We assumed, or we assessed, and we thought 25% could be more, could be less. But the one thing that we do know, it's very unlikely that you're going to get near to 2 degrees under static cooling. So it'll require some sort of tunneling system. So we are trying to go and help you. What we think you can do, if you go through the normal cold chain, the way you did in the past, and you only use negative air cooling or tunnels at the latter part last, and see how quickly we can pull it down to the 2 degrees.
I think we need to get perspective on what the WTO dispute settlement system is all about. I'm not going to assume that every one of you know what that is about. How does it differ from a domestic court system? So shortly, I will reflect on specifically sanitary and phytosanitary cases. And secondly, I would talk to the issue of the political economy. Why is it so difficult for us to move forward? And thirdly, I will give you the short update. All try that to do within, 5 minutes. So early on in the WTO 95, they already realized that plant and animal health issues and human health issues could be an obstacle to trade, and it could be abused. Whereas we've got tariffs are not opaque. You can price that into your product. Okay, so you can negotiate tariffs down. So that's the low-hanging fruit. But the phytosanitary SPS issues that we call is very opaque, and it's very much dependent on the capacity of your trading partner to comply. So it could be disproportionately heavy on low-capacity developing countries, and that was recognized in that agreement. Okay, so that's the first point. So SPS cases, there's about 53 that went through the dispute settlement panel so far. 28 went to the panel phase. There's 3 phases: consultation, panel, and appellate body phase. Okay. 28 of them went through the panel phase. In all of those 28, the complaining party, as we are in this case with FCM, has been victorious. SPS cases are famous for being very fact-intensive, very much scientifically intensive as well. So it's quite astounding that in all of those cases, the complaining party has actually won. So I think that's the first important point. Secondly, what do you attack a measure on? What will the panel do? And I think that's important for us to realize, what can we expect from a dispute? What we have in SPS cases is the ALOP, acceptable level of protection. In other words, that's basically how comfortable a country can sit with the risk posed to its animals, health, and humans. And that level is a socio-political decision. So if you are very risk averse, you would have a higher ALOP. If you've got relatively low, you're low ALOP. But a panel would never tell either the EU or any party that your ALOP is too high. But what the panel will do is they will check the measure that you put in place to speak to your ALOP, and that the panel will look. So hence, what we are doing is we're saying those measures that are imposed to address their ALOP is, and Rocco has mentioned those, disproportionate. There are less trade restrictive measures in place. It could be discriminatory, etc., etc. Different grounds. You can go and check on the WTO website under trade topics, disputes. You see the South African dispute there. The request for consultations is there, and there you can see all the grounds. Furthermore, even if you win the case, a panel will not tell the party how to fix that problem. Very rarely. I can think of about 2 cases where a panel will tell the EU then how to go and fix their measure to bring it into compliance with the WTO. They would basically tell them, go back home and bring it into compliance with your measure, with your obligations under the WTO. So that's also important. We can't tell, a panel won't tell the EU to go back to the June 2022 FCM regulations. And we need to be aware of this. Furthermore, the panel will give the EU a reasonable period of time, which could be anything to 11 months, to implement that measure. Okay, so we need to be aware of that. It's not a quick fix. But for people who keep saying that the WTO dispute settlement system is long drawn-out system, well, compare that with a domestic dispute, and I'll get to that quickly. Okay. So, furthermore, a panel will not issue damages to the citrus industry in South Africa, like a court of law in a civil suit. What it will do is will calculate the economic impact of that measure on South Africa, and it then will allow South Africa the right to take countermeasures, i.e. withhold trade concessions which South Africa has given the EU at the WTO level, to the value of the damages inflicted by this measure. And that countervailing can be done on another agricultural product where we withhold or increase the duties. It could be on copyright, on music, anything, okay, within the WTO framework. Okay, regarding the second point, why is it difficult? The political economy of dispute settlement, there's a lot that's been written on that. The industry cannot litigate. And I think for those of you who didn't know that, we cannot litigate. It's only a government-to-government litigation. We talked about what we can control and what we can't control. We cannot control going to the WTO dispute settlement. It's for government to decide. But short of that, there's a lot of stuff that we can do, and what the CGA has done over the years. There's been a lot of stakeholders forums, ministerial visitations, letters, legal drafting assistance, scientific support, legal fees paid, up to the point where it's now for government to take the step. And government has taken the step. First time ever in the history of South Africa, in the WTO since 95, that the government actually raised the dispute as a complaining party. Never before. It's for your industry that they did this. Okay? It's for your industry. Never has an African country, to my mind, taken the EU to court. Never. South Africa is the first one. Okay, so we have to see it for what it is. Small mercies. They've requested consultations June last year. We went through the consultation phase. Rocco indicated that, and the minister as well this morning, wasn't satisfactory. What's outstanding? I talk to the third point now. We need to get that panel established. Do not wait long on that anymore. We need to get that panel established, and we need to go through the panel phase. Just remember, all through these adjudicating measures, we can still negotiate. We can still have our sidebar meetings, try to come to an agreement. But what you do with dispute settlement, you push your counterparty into a formal process. And you are in control of that process because you're the complaining party. Okay, so I think that's important. And then, what about CBS? As this industry has all agreed that CBS needs to be taken on board in whatever, what we need is a request for consultation on CBS, and then we deal with it further on. But CBS needs to be part of the package. I think I'm going to stop there, but thank you very much.
I can honestly say that, in my opinion, the team that we have in Geneva, 3 of them I've known for quite a long time, and they're probably the best that we can hope for. So we've got a really good team. The ambassador, the director for the legal services, and the practicing attorney, in my opinion, are really as good as they come. So we've got a great position, in my opinion. Time is always of the essence, but the point is, where we are at the moment is highly satisfactory. If we keep going, I think this is it's definitely the place we have to be. And joining CBS, no question on that. Vaughan, do you want to add anything on the EU? Okay, so let me deal with 3 things on the EU quickly, and then we're going to go to the other gentleman. I want to spend too much. I think we've got 26 minutes left. So the first one is just to deal with what we had last year. Firstly, we've got great data for the first time in the industry, really specific data about our baseline study, what is our financial position, what does these measures cost. So I don't want to overemphasize or throw with figures, but the fact is at the moment, the EU access is roughly costing us 3.7 billion plus a little bit per year to comply with these 2 measures. So financially, it's putting a massive burden on us. And just a little bit of, again, being supportive of the industry is this. I joined you guys in 2014. We were doing 38% of 43 million cartons in totality to the EU. Last year we did 67. So in a time when there was restricted measures in the EU, you guys were able to grow the market by 51%. So exceedingly well done. Last year was a real bummer. That measures in the season, and some really my appreciation to BFAP, who did a lot of work for us, Tracy Candas and the team. It cost us about 200 million, and the additional measure is going to cost us about in the order of about 295 million this year. That's apart from the fact what we get through, just the financial implication. So the current burden on the industry is excessive. Okay, so what are we going to try and do this year to try and assist? Firstly, we've got a mission now, the end of October, with Delrad, going to the 3 biggest entry points in the EU. Italy, Portugal, and Holland. Holland does not present a problem, but they always present an opportunity in the point that they are really pragmatic in the way they deal with market access and protocols. And often if we get them to do something, then we can try and extrapolate and make that a harmonized approach. For you that don't know, the EU has got got harmonized legislation, but it hasn't got harmonized protocols. So it will not, each individual member country is totally able to interpret the legislation and apply it the way they want to. We're trying to find a harmonized approach so we have the same access rules for everyone everywhere. So we hope to be there with the Director of Plant Health, Jan Hendrik Venter, God knows where he's gone, in any case, and Salamina, myself and Elma. And we start in Italy. We'll do Portugal, which has been a real flashpoint in terms of overburden capacity. And then we go to Holland, fix those three. Hopefully, we have a working group. You all know about the Spanish project. So we're looking at options there to lessen that burden with FPF. And we will go to the end of April before the season. And hopefully we can clear the port issue that you've got a little bit more options than just the current ones, which towards the end of the season are giving us a lot of heartache and pressure. And just, I mean, honestly, that measure this year, that delay cost us 200 million. So it was massive. Are there any other things from the floor? I think we finished with the EU. That anybody wants to mention or ask? Are you all sure what we have to do? The only thumb rule I want to give, and this is really a thumb rule. If we look at the additional cold capacity, or let's say the additional cold requirement that you're going to have to deal with regard to oranges, this is the number. We think, actually, CRI thinks, I'm just telling you, is that we stick with what we have. Don't expect that static cooling or cold room is going to get you to 2 degrees. So go through your normal cold rooms, get your ambient down to 5 or a little bit below 5, and then we suggest and we think you're going to need a period of forced air cooling or a tunnel or negative airflow. The current indication, and this is a very rough indication, just to plan your capacity backwards with your cooling partners and your contracting people, is roughly about 24 hours. So if you are at 5 degrees and you need to get to 2 degrees on your oranges going to the EU, you're probably going to need about 24 hours in a negative air cool facility to conduct that. You can go from the start to the end, like we do with grapes and anything else. But the point is, if you want to use your current capacity, which will lessen the burden on the negative air cooling component, that is the rough number. And then at this point, we'll come back on the Spanish port side of it. We haven't had last year any problems in Algeciras or Vigo. There was no interceptions. We had 2 in Portugal last year, majority up in Netherlands. And just one, I want to break, not that Vaughan needs any support, but just to say that for the last 3 years, he's been a real pain in the ass about the measures or the protocol on false codling mod. Now, just to say this much, I mean, I went back to that discussion, I think, 25 times. Eventually, the Dutch is now where they are. They now take out a larvae that they find in our fruit, warm it up in their hand for a minute, open the hand, and it has to crawl somewhere. Not that it can defrost, flat. So Vaughan changed that. God knows, I mean, I went back 25 times. I'm so unpopular in Holland now, but at least he got me to do it. So that is the one. So we hope to do that protocol and move that same recognition or process down to the other member states. Okay, so we finished with the EU. Everybody's happy. 20 minutes left. Let's go to America. The wider access, I think Vaughan spoke about. Just point on technical aspect. So in a discussion with a panel on the recognition of CBS in the process, the wider access, the US has principally agreed because their internal policy and their market access policy with regard to CBS from both Uruguay and Argentina are principally based on the South African argument. So they've accepted the scientific part that the fruit is not a pathway. So there's no scientific thing that's holding up the EU agreement. What's holding up the agreement is reciprocity. So they want something in return. At the moment, we don't want to give that, and it's mainly to do with, as you both all know, pork, chicken, and so forth. So there's not a technical barrier anymore. CRI has done its job, and well done. The issue at the moment is a political one. Okay. Sorry, Nick, into your soup.
I'll break up my talk very quickly into three parts. The good news, the bad news, and then just next steps. And Deon touched on some of the bad news already. As far as good news is concerned, I would say that in November of 2020, APHIS published, APHIS is the equivalent of DELROD, by the way. It's the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, part of USDA. They published a rule back in November of 2020, again stating that South Africa could ship citrus to any U.S. port of entry. As you may recall, before, South Africa was only allowed 4 ports of entry, and it was Wilmington, Delaware, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Newark, New Jersey, and Houston, Texas. Again, APHIS undertook a 2-year study, and they looked at over 2,000 South African citrus shipments, and they carried out intensive inspections during this 2-year period. And it was mainly looking for false codling moth, and they did not find any at all. So APHIS was able to change the regulation where you now can export your citrus to any port of entry. Again, when APHIS was going through the rulemaking process, I was really sweating it for a while because I thought for sure one of the animal sectors in the United States, especially pork industry, would probably raise some concerns and or lobby heavily through USTR or through USDA, again, to stop the rule just because of this reciprocity issue with U.S. pork access to South Africa. So again, it went through, and about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from the National Pork Producers Council asking me if I had anything to do with getting the rule through without notifying anyone on the animal side. So big success on that front. Again, as far as the bad news is concerned, again, with expanded market access for South Africa, it's still pretty much at a dead end right now, and mainly because of the reciprocity issue. It's a quid pro quo between expanded access for South African citrus and better access for U.S. pork to South Africa. As many of you know, the United States has access to South Africa, but again, there's a disagreement as far as some of the phytosanitary import regulations that South Africa applies to U.S. pork. It's mainly focused on a virus known as the porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, or PRRS. And what occurs is that the United States is mainly interested in shipping pork shoulders to South Africa. And when they arrive in South Africa, the Ministry of Agriculture veterinarians, they remove all the lymph glands. And again, it pretty much ruins the cut of meat from the United States. So again, our pork industry is very, very concerned that the phytosanitary barrier is not justified by science. Again, in like 2020, the World Animal Health Organization, formerly the OIE, they published a standard that stated that it's pretty unequivocal and it's pretty black and white as far as standards go. Most international standards have a lot of gray area as far as their interpretation, but this standard on the PRRS virus was pretty unequivocal. And it said that when it comes to commercial meat, risk should be considered minimal regardless of the disease status of the exporting country. So again, that's where we are now as far as pork and citrus. Again, the pork industry in the United States has a considerable lobby, and they continually make the rounds within USDA. the U.S. Trade Representative, and of course they've got a lot of representation as far as U.S. Congress is concerned, both at the Senate and at the House of Representatives level. As far as next steps are concerned, I would say that technical negotiations have been pretty much exhausted. Both Delrod and APHIS have been meeting for at least the last several years, and again, APHIS basically states that the rule is pretty much in a limbo state, and again, it's up to USDA leadership to decide when they'll publish the rule. And by the way, this APHIS citrus black spot rule has been sitting since October of 2018. So APHIS has been ready to publish the rule, but again, because of this reciprocity issue, nothing has occurred. I would only state that as far as next steps are concerned, again, South Africa engaged at a higher level, at the ministerial or Ministry of Trade level, again, where they reach out to their counterparts in the United States. Again, one avenue that they might consider, as Lambert mentioned, was possible dispute resolution. I had spoken with some of my ex-colleagues at the U.S. Trade Representative, and they mentioned going to WTO and using this ad hoc dispute resolution mechanism known as Article 12.2. And again, it's more of an ad hoc discussion between both sides, and it's usually goes through arbitration, informal arbitration that takes place. So again, it's one of the things that I might recommend if this stalemate continues on a market expansion for South Africa citrus. That's all I have, and it's a pleasure being with you again.
Okay, so just one other point. I think I strongly believe that phytosanitary access, market access, goes hand in hand with commercial interest. So a lot of the work we've done in Europe have done on the back of strong commercial interest and participation from your clients or your agents or your importers on the other side. They've got much more ability to put pressure on the phyto, or let's say the regulatory authorities. The same thing with the US. So there was an idea from some of you that we try and deal with the US and add a little bit of that commercial pressure by offering, because I think there's a shortage now of oranges in Florida. And we look at probably one of the rules we were considering for the EU, where we have juice end-to-end, end product destruction, because DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is quite opposed to the Biden administration, and he could probably help. So that's one of the things we're working on in the US. Okay.
So I think, as Justin has pointed out, in Vision 260, the Far East is going to be a critical part of any ability to absorb the volume we have. Vaughan's alluded to all the challenges we have at a market access side, which is a massive problem and ongoing. Just, Vaughan, maybe I can ask you, you had it on your board, was a change on protocols. Have we started in the markets we do have access on the lemons, where we've changed the lemon protocol in China, which makes it easier? Where are we at in terms of changing that in some of the other markets that we already have access to?
Yeah, Mark, it's a good question. So the idea is to get it established in at least one, potentially two bilateral protocols, and then you can actually, based on a year or two's successful implementation, use that as a precedent for rolling out into other protocols. So we have done that. That's part of the disappointment about not closing the Vietnam one, because it's actually included in the Vietnam protocol. So it would have been great if that can be concluded, because that sets a precedent of an implementation. Likewise, it's in the Thailand protocol. It's been negotiated for introduction into the Thailand protocol. So that's the idea. Get it in one or two of those, run it for a year or two, demonstrate successful implementation, and then you can do it more broadly thereafter.
So yes, I mean, I think, we look at access protocols, those are the big barriers. The third big challenge, and I get frustrated because going back 10, 12 years, I think we met with Minister Rob Davies at the time, and we just get the same answer thrown back at us, that we're part of other trade agreements, and we have not got the ability to go and negotiate in our own capacity as a country, even though many of those other countries in Africa, SADC, that we partner with have very differing ambitions and reasons for their trade agreements. So we are trying to work on how we can possibly unpack some of these markets in the East and understand. We understand that theoretically China, the amount of product, non-agricultural, that gets imported into South Africa, and the duties that are paid to the government in South Africa sort of puts them in a position where they don't want to really be negotiating a free trade agreement with China, because they're going to lose a large portion of their income. But the question is can we sort of start looking at some of these other countries and finding countries that it actually is in our favor and grow it from there. So I think trade is a massive constraint, or the trade barriers, non-tariff and non-tariff, are a big barrier. Shipping services is the next big challenge to the East. It's quite frustrating, because I think it's where the most potential for growth is. It doesn't matter whether it's grapes, palm. We've seen the palm industries move to a position where they are relying much less on Europe, and the product they're putting into or planting is product that can be shipped to the Far East and Southeast Asian markets over much wider windows. And the same applies for the citrus, but we need services. It doesn't help, like we know last year, between Far East and Middle East, 85,500 pallets of Eastern Cape fruit was trucked to Durban to catch vessels out of Durban. So all of our rivals, the different windows we service, are not being taken advantage of. So I think we need to solve the shipping side. Hopefully Thomas can talk a bit more to that, but really that's the one. And then I think the third and last one is getting the right quality into those markets. We need to understand that those markets are very different to Europe, they're different to Russia, and unless we can understand the nuances of what each of those markets really needs, we are going to fail. We've come across a number of people who say they're not prepared to ship to China because they've just burnt their fingers whenever they've tried. And a lot of that is because the message has not gone through either to the growers who are packing for those markets, or the people who are trading the product into those markets don't have a fundamental understanding on what's required. But really, those markets are very varietal specific, quality specific, timing specific, and sort of from a grower side, I'd say you guys need to get closer to understanding what is required in those markets if you want to be able to grow them. Because if we deliver consistent quality at the right level, we are definitely going to grow demand. And I think there's an enormous opportunity to take out most of our competition from Argentina, Australia, etc. But if we keep sending the wrong product at the wrong time, taking too long to ship, or we have grapes 4 or 5 weeks in a row, vessels bypassing Cape Town, and product arrives after 52 days, the reputation is ruined. So really, that's, I suppose, a little bit of feedback on the Far East and Southeast Asian markets.
Okay, I just want to leave you with a last thought. We often run, I think we were here the first year when I don't know, Hannes, I think he spoke about, we have to market so much more mandans. If you look at the figure this morning, it's far beyond that. And I think, who was it? Jock, who said, if you can't say the bloody stuff, don't come complain to me. But let me just make one point just quickly on the world volume. Guys, at the moment, the world volume is 158 million tons of fruit. We 2.6 million tons. We're 1.34% of the total world production. We're minuscule. Secondly, by far, about 80%, 81% of the product is in the Northern Hemisphere. If you follow the line that consumption and fruit at the moment is snack, healthy, and a modern fruit. That's what we're all trying to do. That's what Ava's doing very effectively. What we all did with the banana, we did with the apple, we came with a grape punnet. We now have 2 superstars. We've got mangoes and we've got lemons. Everybody is Jamie Oliver. Kids in the Far East, Europe, everywhere, my kids. Eating food is now in the entertainment, it's not nutrition. So if you look at all of that, and you look at the relative size of South Africa and where we are, out of season. I think Kassir told farmers in my years at Stellenbosch that he can't tell them how to, but they need to start to have monoculture. They need to be able koring op koring, because that's what the economics said. If you look at that volume at the moment, the 2 biggest economies in the world, or let's say the 2 biggest people-dense economies, India and China. Our market access to them is not, it's possible, or it's possible in terms of China, but our effective penetration is minuscule. I think if I remember correctly, at the moment, Asia produces, I think, 52% of the total production in the world of citrus. I think it's 82 million tons. If you look at China, it's 44.6 million tons. We can fit into that about 25 times. And they only export 1 million ton of the 44.6. So somewhere, I know they're eating, cherries and stone fruit and other stuff out of season. But golly, that's 2 huge markets. So we really need to be much more smart in the way we develop, because I think the Vision 260 that's not the problem. The problem is our market access, not market access for phytosanitary, but market development. And we can, in terms of market access for phytosanitary reasons, we can, on the back of that, develop markets as well. I think there's a great future. We've got a tough time at the moment, but I honestly believe we're going to solve this one, sort it out, and let's develop those markets. They are 2 massive ones that we need to work on, Masha. Thanks, guys.